Every day's a chance you can do something amazing to feel your passion blazing and shine. Hey.
Paint with every vision, dance in new directions, explode to new heights in your mind.
I will rise up with you today.
Lift up my voice.
Lift up my voice and boldly say, we are the ones we've been waiting for.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to AGNT Speaks. I am your host, Reverend Erin McCabe, and I come to you from Unity Village Chapel, which is the ministry that is of Unity, that is on grounds at Unity Village in Missouri. So it is my delight to honor you, to welcome you, to bring this conscious conversation to you every week. We intend to have conversations that activate mindfulness, that create a world that work for all, that inspire action. And so we are here as your AGNT leadership panel, led by the Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith, and we come to you with these conversations. So if this is your first time here, welcome, welcome, welcome. You can check into this conversation every week live on Facebook at AGNT, or you can check out the archives, and you can also get up close and personal in the Zoom room. So if you'd like that link, just head to the registration page on our AGNT website. So this week we have with us Reverend David Alexander. He is in Georgia, leading a spiritual center there, and I always value these conversations. I value, David, the work that you do in the world. You always have something really incredible going on. You know, you and how you embody ministry is unique and unrepeatable. And so that is something that I have just been graced by watching you and being able to presence you and how you do life and how you do ministry in our New Thought movement. So, you know, with that being said, there are so many things we could converse about today. There are so many ideas and thoughts that are reaching people right where they are. And our intention is to, you know, give people spiritual perspective, spiritual tools, a spiritual practice, and to also talk about the external realities that are going on around us and among us in the world today, which there is no shortage of topics and conversations there and heart-opening experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Reverend Erin. It's great to be with you. Always great to be part of AGNT's work in the world and expanding its message and reach. And yeah, there's a lot going on. I'll start with just I'll throw out a couple of things. I have an idea of where to go here, but in my own family today, our oldest son is home from high school today. That we chose to keep him home because earlier in the week, the school that he attends had a circulating threat on social media for gun violence, and it turns out to be one of several schools that this has been a rash of things happening, and apparently it looks like it's a copycat kind of thing where the names of the schools and stuff have been changed, and it's been happening in various school districts throughout the country. But you know, so there's one thing, and you know, it's different to watch the news and to hear about that, and it's quite something else to receive it as a parent of a child who, you know, is attending that school. And, you know, your part of your mind wants to say, oh, it's fake. It's, you know, this deep fake stuff going on or whatever. And another part of you wants to say, no, you're not going to school today. You know, you don't want to be wrong about that. And that is realizing how much, residual trauma there is in all of us from that, because all it takes is that little something to cause us all to kind of stand up and go, oh my gosh, not me, not my kid, not here, you know. So it's just, you know, my head swirling with those things. And of course, school districts and the teachers all dealing with that as well. And then, so it's just sort of like a little check-in.
Yes.
What I'm doing. And then beyond that, you know, what's going through my mind right now is about all of our centers and in New Thought and Unity and CSL and beyond, and looking at, many of us coming back to in-person services and just assessing, our audiences and where we are and where we're going, and then balancing that with what's happening in the world and what's being called. And we've been talking here on this platform for quite some time about what's being called in us in terms of prophetic voice and really addressing social issues. And I think a lot of our centers are seeing now the contrast of that, which is an internal clarity of our voice and vision, and contrasting that with maybe what people are drawn to and what they want. And so I have a kind of a question for everybody that would run across this today or in the future. And it's about, if you're part of a New Thought community, are you really clear about what you want? And I'm asking myself this question as well, because I think often what we say we want, it might be at odds with what we're being called to.
And at odds with what we're willing to stand for and co-create. So host, contribute to whatever it is. Yeah. And so because I think what we all want, it seems on the surface anyway, is, we want affinity groups. We want a community where we feel like we belong. We want, we want to be liked and loved. We want a place that makes us happy and cheerful and teaches us positive things and all of that. And often churches, not just New Thought, but church in general, often the structures are challenged because what people want are at odds with the message of really changing the world and what that actually takes, right? So it's just really up for me right now. It's like, if you're attending a church online or in person, are you really clear about what you want and being in alignment with what that requires of you? And of course, that obviously applies at the individual level as well, right? I say I want a world that works for everyone, but am I willing to examine what I'm purchasing, or how much meat I'm consuming, or what car I drive, or watching football? And I was thinking about that recently with all the football stuff, and like, are we willing to acknowledge what we're contributing to, what we're co-creating? So this is such a conscious conversation.
Yeah. I said something on Sunday at my center in Atlanta, and it was about this, and it was, and what I said was that it's our job to be, essentially to be prophetic, and to stay focused on the principles and the principles of consciousness, even if they upset the principalities. Right? Even if it upsets the institution, even if it upsets the organization, because organizations by nature are designed to kind of turn in on themselves in order to define who they are against who they're not, right? Who the rest of the world is. And so it's like, okay, so we're this organization, and this is who belongs, and this is how we pray, and this is who we read, and all of that. And it's like, yeah, but inside of that container is this thing that can't be bound by precedent, that can't be bound by a structure or organization, that's constantly seeking to burst out. And so it's like, are we willing to be committed to the principles, even if it upsets the principalities? And I referenced Paul, for example, in the formation of the church. The succession of church leadership was thought to be going to James, Jesus's brother, right? He was the bishop. He was the most beloved. It was a Jewish sect, right? And it was going to remain that way. And everybody knew, well, he's the right person. He's the next in line. He's the, and Paul comes along, who's never met Jesus, but has had an experience of the Christ, of the principle. And he says, this thing is for everyone. Right? You don't have to be circumcised. You don't have to be Jewish. You don't have to. This is an inclusive thing for everyone. And, so he was willing to upset the principalities in order to be dedicated to the principle. Now, we could say a lot about how far off the Christian church has gotten about that in the meantime, but in his time, right? That was, it was a very inclusive and very sort of, what do I want to say?
Outside of the box way to go.
Outside of the box, boundary breaking kind of thing.
Right. Probably upset a lot of people, and it turned tradition on its head.
And it's what ultimately created Christianity as its own separate thing that we know it today, but because he caused it to, not because it was his intention, it was his intention to create a more inclusive thing, but where it was as a Jewish sect was not willing to go that far. Like the organization wasn't willing to go that far. So I think that's something we in AGNT bump up against a lot because we're constantly pushing our own organizations. That's why AGNT exists with kind of this, collaborative structure, but not bound by too much, because we want to remain in that prophetic space to be able to push the boundaries. But I think it's a call for all of us, whether we're ministers, members, whoever we are, related to New Thought. So that's what's kind of been on my heart. Yeah,
that's a lot. And everything you brought up, David, is in my life right now as well. Like, it's interesting. I mean, we're all connected and this is a divine appointment, but I'm just thinking about the number of people here that are with us that are going, yep, me too. Yep, I've noticed that. Yep, that just happened this week. We have a virtual sanctuary, we call it. Every Sunday morning, we gather in the Zoom room so we can Brady Bunch view everyone and see everyone's faces and really feel like we're connecting. And in that, we take prayer requests after. And one of our prayer requests was from a live streamer, I believe from Ohio. And it was a prayer request about a local high school. And it was a really intense moment. There were tears in our virtual Zoom room, just presencing the prayer request to hold this school that had a threat in light. And it was just, to presence that with community and to hold a prayer and to, be invited into that. You feel even just the idea of a threat in it, you just feel the magnitude of that. And, the gift that we can join together. But I had no idea until you shared that right now, that this is something that's happening in our nation. And so we know that energy is out here in people's hearts right now. And like you said, the collective trauma and the PTSD, I doubt there's a person here on this planet that doesn't hear of these experiences in the news or in their communities that doesn't have a soul heartbreak every time this happens, and a just dismay at our world and our culture and how we have not changed things enough to make these very difficult to actually happen, you know what I mean? Or to stop this. And to know that is going on in our world around us right now, I mean, that tells me something about our practice. That tells me about how to be out in the world when we're, interacting with other people, that people's hearts are raw, people's hearts are open, people's hearts are challenged by what humanity is doing on the planet and how we continue to make a hell out of a heaven in some areas of life. And especially when it comes to our amazing young beloveds that are growing up in the world that we have created for them.
Right. And, it's, and I see a question that's come in, we'll try to get to that in a moment. But it's again about sticking to the principles in the face of everything that challenges it. I was happy at one hand to learn that it was, a copycatted threat that's been going around, and that it, wasn't a lot of legitimacy to it. But I was also very sad by that as well. That there's this effort, whoever it is, to keep us in sort of perpetual fear and triggered into trauma and to just create chaos for the sake of chaos. It was like, oh, this is like, where is that coming from? Like, what is that about? It's just the desire to let me put this out. Yeah, let me put this out there and disrupt and just see what happens. And so I think for me, it's about, the question is, can we speak about fear when it becomes personal? I think it's a great question, because it brings us back to the clarity of our principles. Our principles in New Thought deal with the laws of consciousness, how consciousness works, whether we're talking about the personal level or the collective social level. And and there's a through line between those two levels, which is it's the same, right? Macro, micro, it's because it's all consciousness. And I think we forget that when we A, are triggered by fear, and B, when we're looking at this question, the question I started with, which is what do you want? When we say we want affinity groups, we want people that look like us and vote like us, and so it's really easy to say, okay, there's this call for, let's say in the New Thought movement, for churches to become more socially engaged, socially active, talking or addressing social justice issues. It's very easy to follow that call and then become a community that is more, let's say, politically liberal minded. That would be very easy to do. But I think it's important to remember, and I wouldn't even say necessarily wrong in the environment that we're in, but it would be important to remember that beyond left or right, beyond liberal or conservative, we're talking about what we teach is how consciousness works. And so we have to keep that at the center. How consciousness works, how we deal with fear when it comes up in our mind, how we deal with issues. And so if we're really dedicated to that, not to liberal or conservative, but to how consciousness works, then we can, that's what gives us the power to address prophetically anything that might be a quote unquote liberal or conservative social issue with the same amount of tenacity, because we're talking about without judgment. We're simply saying, this is how consciousness works.
Right.
So
And
in this case, bringing it back, right? Okay. So we have this threat constantly coming up that's now disrupting our field. Well, we know that on a personal level, things keep reoccurring in our mind until we deal with them. And gun control and this issue of the mass amount of guns that we have and the access that are to them and the various laws, the lack of national regulation around that is something that we have not effectively dealt with. Some 70-80% of people agree with certain forms of sensible gun reform, and Congress won't do anything. So when you have a situation
and mental health issues, I really want to get that in there.
Mental health,
Mental health issues is a lot of it. Mental health issues, community issues.
Yeah, exactly. That's the next layer of it, right? So when you have something where there's a logical path, so again, we make it personal again. If there's a logical path forward in your life, but you refuse to look at it, you refuse to address it, you refuse to take action on it, and you simply, I would say this is not a spiritual practice, right? But if you're doing that at some level in your life, whether it's around finances or money or relationships or physical health, whatever it is, then the law of consciousness says, okay, well, I'm going to keep bringing it back up. I'm going to keep, and that's what's happening right now. So the threat is showing up in these different ways, a different school district. It's like, here it is again. Are you going to deal with it now? Are you going to deal with it now? Right. Oh, okay. You're going to wait until it's actually real and there's blood on the ground. Right. Oh, okay. That's your choice. We're always a choice. Right. And then you go to the next layer, which is the mental health stuff, which we don't put enough resources behind. We don't, we don't address. And we have this tendency to, in our Western consciousness, to excuse things by making them personal. Well, that person had mental health issues, right? But that person, and as if that compartmentalizes, I think sort of compartmentalizes it and makes it okay that we don't collectively take responsibility. And it's like, that's a direct violation of the principle of oneness. And so again, the laws of consciousness work the way the laws of consciousness work. And if we work with them, then we can improve not only our lives, but the lives of everyone. And if we don't, then the law doesn't care. The law will just keep bringing forward the opportunities.
Right. The choice points.
Yeah.
Wow. Well said, David. Well said. So this discussion about spiritual centers and where we are, it's relevant as well, right where we are. We're in Missouri, and we had opened up, and then we had some exposures in the congregation, and we had the Delta variant coming in. So attendance went from kind of a strong start for having opened back up, and then it went down and down and down and down. And you know how it is. It takes a lot of people to run a Sunday morning. And so if you take into account the number of volunteers and staff that were also attending, it went down pretty far. And that was before, before the COVID exposures, and as Delta was kind of, people were having more concern about that, or more wanting to follow protocol, and we opened with protocol. And so anyway, we went back to virtual. I'm not going to say closed down, because for me, it's absolutely clear that the ministry never closes down. It's just whether or not the in-person happens. And I cannot get over the gifts that have come from this last, year plus, as far as consciousness building and connection building and deepening. But as far as the in-person activities, and for us, it's this interesting mix of, you have folks that you have folks that will come either way. They'll come if it's virtual, they'll come if it's in-house, they'll come if there are regulations in-house, and some that will come either way. And then you have people that, won't come if there's a mask or a regulation or anything else in place. And then you have folks that the internet and looking at a screen doesn't work for them. That's not community or church to them. And so they're not going to log on and see it on Facebook or on the website or in a Zoom room. And then you've got another group of folks that all they do are virtual because they live in different areas, or that's their preference, right? And so really looking at those decisions and how do you move forward, getting the information you need and communicating with everyone about what's going on right now. So we're in the process. We're about to have a board meeting the first week of November, again, to discuss, but we haven't gotten a lot of feedback. When we've done surveys, we've gotten feedback in those surveys, and they pretty much support the decisions, overwhelmingly support the decisions that we've made so far, aside from maybe 2 to 4 individuals. And then you've got this, interesting conversation that we always have in ministry and in spiritual community, is that, like, how do you talk to everyone and ask everyone something,
Right.
Aside from doing a survey? And it's pretty difficult, but we've just kind of put out the feelers to say, what is there a demand for right now? A consistent demand for and support for. So it's like, we would need the volunteers. We need the financial support to do it. We need to know that there are going to be people that show up, and it's not going to be like an ice winter day every time we open the doors.
Right.
We need to know if you're just as happy and you'd rather stay virtual only right now, because it is an investment of our time and our energy. And there's so many things going on in ministry right now. I'm sure you've noticed the same thing, but to a lot of people, things slowed down. But I think to us as spiritual leaders, nothing slowed down at all. And in fact, it changed forms, and it's been a constant growing expansion, learning curve full of opportunities and excitement, but also a lot to do. So we're in that process right now of looking at what is there a demand for? Who would you like to be? How would we like to show up? And balancing that with, science and our role in the community as being bearers of love and standing in principle and all of that in our greater community, and not being a part of the problem, but being a part of the support and the solution for people on all levels, like health and wellness, safety, mental health and
Right.
wellness, safety, and all of that. So what an interesting time we are in.
Yeah, exactly. Which is all of that, which is why I say we need to get really clear on what is it that you want. Right? Because if you want spiritual community, if you want a loving place to show up and to be spiritually fed, then, you need to support it. You need to financially to volunteer, et cetera. Every church needs board members and key volunteer positions, et cetera. And so this is an important time. And then notice the part of you that maybe wants something so that it could be this, incubation space of protection, to sort of inoculate you from all the craziness of the outside world, and balance that. There's nothing wrong with that. We all want safe places to be. But how do you balance that with how do we create a place that is actually more than just inoculating us from the craziness of the world, but is actually equipping us to change that? And, so we're moving from safe place to brave space, right? How do we create brave space together? And are you willing to support that? Because in a brave space, what might happen is that your own buttons will get pushed as well, right? It'll not be just a place that is safe for you, but it also will be a place that will challenge you. And are we up for that? And I hope the answer is yes, because I think we all need to be challenged. And it goes back to the questions that have come in about the levels of consciousness and all of that. And the world is constantly busy trying to address the problems that are in the world at the level that's created them, which is why it's constantly in a narrative of polarization, right? These folks over here are the problem with this thing over here. And if the Democrats would just do this, or if the conservatives would just do that, or if the so-and-sos would just do this, and so on and so forth. And that's the level at which it, and so our job as spiritual communities is not to enter that fray in terms of picking a side, but rather it's to bring our gift, which is understanding the laws of consciousness in the context of those conversations. And so it might look like we're aligning with one side or the other because of the outcomes of the actions. But in truth, what we're attempting to do, and it's certainly an attempt that requires a great deal of focus and dedicated practice, what we're attempting to do is say, how do we apply the laws of consciousness in this issue? And that should be our dedicated focus, individually and collectively. And I think if we could do that, then it automatically is going to be brave space, because it's not about sheltering us from anything. It's about really, I say it all the time. It's like we teach how to examine what's going on, how to get to the root cause of something that's not working, and how to eliminate it and replace it with something better and move forward towards the alignment of what Spirit would design for us. That's literally the bedrock of what we teach.
Yes.
Affirmative prayer and the laws of consciousness. And so, let's get to it. Right? Without favor or regard to left or right.
Yes. You are so amazing. Your consciousness and your mind and your ability to articulate principle and to share it is really inspiring and grounding. I absolutely know that people are nourished by today's conversation. And I really want to thank you for igniting it, for being who you are in the world, and for allowing me to be a part of this conversation with you today. So
yes.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Yeah. Did you want to say anything closing?
Oh, no, I just said many blessings. Thank you.
All right. So
always an honor.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for AGNT Speaks. We will be here next week. And if you want to share this broadcast, you can hop on the Facebook page and reshare it with anyone you would like to. And you can also check it out later in our archives. So thank you for being a part of this conscious community. Thank you for bringing your soul and yourself here today. Namaste.